So there's a teacher in Colorado, and she has decided she is not going to grade papers anymore. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Good morning. It's good to have you here. I'm doing something different today. I am doing a book report because I came across this interesting book and I thought I would share some nuggets from it. This was left for me in the comments to the rant I did about how much I hate grading. And one of my commenters said, you should check out the work by Sarah Zerwin. And I looked her up on Amazon and I was intrigued because Sarah, I'm going to call her Sarah because I feel like she's my friend. I don't know this lady, but she's doing cool stuff. She's been a teacher for as long as I have. She works out of Boulder, Colorado. She has high school English, AP, Lit composition. She's got some ideas. So I have never done a book report before on my channel, but I just thought that there were some nuggets in here that we could pull out to apply to all of our classrooms. So Sarah, nice job. I was impressed. By the way, first up, love the title. You know, I love a play on words. That's really clever. And so I appreciated that. And I liked the spirit from which you brought this into the world. Sarah's been doing this work for almost 10 years, trying to figure out how to turn her classroom from one that's focused on points and grades to one which is much more authentic to student learning. And she's got some cool ideas. So I'm going to dig into that. A couple of heads up on this video. One, I've got dogs that in the house that will bark occasionally because they're mad that they're not out here on the deck with me. Two, I live in the path of an airport, so you will probably hear planes. I'm just going to keep going and try to fix it on audio if I need to. And third, I'm going to look at my notes because I had a lot to say about Sarah's work, and I tried to film this without looking at my notes, and I just keep losing track of my thoughts. So I'm going to stay organized. You'll see me looking at this as we go. Okay, so first up, just some overview thoughts that Sarah's book made me realize that I'm not alone, which was wonderful. She also kind of made me sit with some crunchy things, like the fact that I do use points to control student behavior, right? In order to keep the chaos at bay, I often put points on an assignment that really doesn't need it, but I had this, I think, misguided belief that kids will only do the work if they think that there are points. And that kind of led me to reflecting on my 20 time experience. The whole reason I brought 20 time into my classroom was because I was so tired of the, is this going to be on the test question? I'm like, oh, sometimes we just learn to learn. And her experience of 10 years transitioning her classroom away from being so points focused and grade driven into being more into authentic learning. And I'll talk about how she assesses that in a second. Really made me realize that she might be a little bit of a spirit animal for me because kids will learn when they're passionate about the thing that they are being asked to learn. The points get in the way a lot of the time because then it's just a game that the kids are hacking because they're smart, and that's the system that we set up. And so this kind of goes to the big structural systems, and Sarah is working within the system to change things in her immediate classroom, which I thought was really cool. Another thing that she made me think of was the, I had a gut feeling that the system was set up to support industry in that whole, like, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s industrial revolution thing, like we need compliant factory workers. She actually has a chunk of her book where she confirms that. She's done the research and she reports that out. And yes, indeed, it is public school is not necessarily built to inspire innovative, creative risk takers. It is definitely built to reward compliance and maybe even is a tool of oppression. So those are some big, heavy things to think about. And so thank you, Sarah, for making me pause and think about those things. Next, her book gave me some hope because she talks about what she calls the shiny new teacher idealism. And I still have that. And I love that somebody else at this point in our careers still has that too. And so working on this project kind of brought that to her. And also she emphasizes that her path is not the path. And I really appreciated that because some of the stuff she's doing, I just don't think I could pull off. So I like the idea that take what works for you and use it and leave behind what doesn't work for you. And that's just a good sort of life advice for all teachers with all of the professional development stuff that we're given, which kind of talks to that science versus art stuff that I believe about teaching. This definitely falls into the art of it. So take what works and just set the other stuff aside. One of her big goals for her classroom is to create extensive revision. She wants writers who think deeply about their works and are really comfortable with that revision process. And that makes sense because Sarah, I can just tell from the way she writes and her education background, she's got a doctorate. This woman is a thinker. She is a writer. She's a beautiful writer. And she's an academic. She is teaching AP classes. She's preparing kids for that path, that 4-year path. Me, my goals for the classroom are a little different. I don't have advanced degrees like that. I care, and my kids, I never taught AP. My kids are just sort of like your regular, they call them college prep, but a lot of my kids aren't even going to college. It just means that they'll be college eligible. I got kids who are going to be welders, and I've got kids who are going to be, cosmetologists, and I have kids who are just going to kind of roll up their sleeves and do that kind of work. I have plenty of kids who are college bound too, but my population just always tended to be a little bit more grounded in the practical. So one of my classroom goals has always been to bring the joy for learning. I wanted to model for them passion for your work. And so that would be my overarching goal. So you figure out what your goal is for your classroom and then figure out how to build the structures that are going to support that. I love that she and I, without knowing each other and teaching states away from each other, came up with some of the same solutions. So for her classroom, she actually has the kids work in what she calls pods of 3 or 4 kids, and that becomes their discussion learning, like little mini teams as they're working through things for her AP classes. Me, I turn that into quarter trios, and mine were more focused on games and fun and community building and also small group learning groups, but I switch them up every 9 weeks. I'm not sure how often she switches up her pods, but it's fun that different teachers found a similar solution. So assigning small groups and having them work together really does build that community and ability for students to learn. She also does, just like I do, have that pod, one of your very first assignments, take a group selfie. I always sent the kids out onto the campus, take a selfie, send it to me. She very cleverly, she beat me to this. She calls that group selfie a groupie, which I think is amazing. She also is grounded in what's practical because you do need grades of some sort, right? There has to be a grade that goes on the transcript that gets figured into the student's GPA. Athletes, they need to have some sort of grade for a mid-term check-in in order to maintain eligibility. Even kids need a grade for their car insurance discounts, right? So there has to be a system where there is an actual grade that is created. And in her system, she acknowledges that. So she is rooted in reality. So although it is pointless, there are some points, but she has a cool way of figuring this out. So her grade book will have points in it. So for example, she still does reading checks, like what I call quizzers, to just make sure the kids did the reading outside of class so that you have something to work with in class. She still does that and she still scores them. That's loud traffic. But she enters it into the grade book as a data point rather than like a mathematical factor in the final grade. The final grade is going to be determined by the student sitting down, looking at how well that student has achieved his or her individualized 3 learning goals. So at the beginning of each term, she spends almost the first month of school kind of unprogramming her students to realize that there can be learning without actual points and that playing the game of reading Spark Notes isn't serving anybody and that she has a different way. So she works for a while to get buy-in from her kids, and then about a month into their term, the kids determine their learning goals. And I like this one here. She gives some, helps model some of them, but then the kids can also determine things that are rooted in the standards that speak to them, that are focus areas for them. So for example, this is a learning goal that a student, and if this isn't clear, I'll flash it up on the screen. But basically this student has created that she wants to be a better reader. And so she has school books that she is committing to reading, books that will expand her mind, and books for fun. And so she has a personalized learning goal and a way to track progress to that. And how well that student does will be a factor in determining that student's final grade at the end of the term. And so that's just like goal setting for life. And I really like that. And I would want to figure out a way to fold that layer of the practice into, my classroom when I return. I just think it's a cool way to look at that. She's also figured out how to hack her school's gradebook program. So she discovered that you don't necessarily have to put number scores into the cells where we enter school or student scores. She can put feedback. She can put like, 80% completed, or was late turning this in or did an exceptional job on this. And she can put her instructor's notes into the gradebook so the parents can see that. And again, that becomes a data point that she and the student can draw from when they determine the final semester grade. There's also a cool section in the book about mastery of standards. And what we really are more interested in is growth toward mastery, because mastery will never happen with English language arts, right? We are always going to be working on our craft as writers. We are always going to be learning different ways of public speaking and communication. So to have mastery of something kind of implies that you've checked a box and you can move on to the next thing. But to be a good reader and to think critically about what you're reading, that goes on forever. Maybe if it's a different subject like math, you can prove that you have mastered, geometry formulas for some certain section. I don't even know what the sections are. And you could check that box. But because language arts are arts, it's an art, there is no mastery, right? Like, does a painter ever master a technique? You just keep growing and evolving. And so I like that pause of the terminology that we use because, we're never a master of communication. It's interesting in that since she started doing this, and again, this has been an evolution of, it sounds like about a decade of her learning, it not working right, her putting another layer, adjusting it as she goes. And she's still not there. She says it's not a perfect system. It's just that she's been working on this book and she wanted to put it out there so we could all think about it. But in looking at that, her data shows that she actually now has fewer A's in her classes than she did before when she was just doing a points-driven classroom. Because when the kids sit down to do their final reflection, most of them agree and she agrees that they earn B's and C's because they've set their learning goals. How well did they achieve their goals? What evidence do they have to support that? Most of them are average to above average. Very few of us are excellent in achieving our goals. And I know this is true for me. She uses examples of learning a foreign language or, increasing our exercise and our fitness levels. I am not excellent at my goals for personal improvement. I work toward them. I make progress. Sometimes I'm average, sometimes below average, but very rarely am I excellent in those things. And so it's not a surprise that her grades and her classes reflect that. And I thought that was kind of cool that the kids become a little more self-aware of what it takes to become excellent at achieving their learning goals. Okay, there is part of her program that just is not going to work for me. So she, toward the end of the term, has students write to her what she calls stories of their learning journeys. And it's a narrative where they put themselves as the character and they talk about all the ups and downs that went along the path of their learning, where they succeeded, where they failed, and where they landed. I love that this works for Zerwin. I think that's amazing. It's a little hippie woo-woo for me because I feel like maybe I'm cynical. Maybe I should just try it sometime before I criticize it. I just feel like my kids would try to phony baloney past it a little bit. I think of like my sophomore boys and the story of their learning journey that they would create for me. That one, I don't know. I would actually probably do a conference with the student because I like that one-on-one conversation. But again, with giant class sizes, I don't know how realistic that is. So you could have them write a letter to you explaining why they think they deserve the grade that they want. And then you guys can have that conversation if you guys are miles apart, which could work. I mean, hey, try it. What's the harm of trying it with one class for one semester and seeing what happens? And that's really the spirit of Sarah's book. It's just give it a try. Open up the gradebook and see what happens if you put letters instead of numbers in a cell. What would happen? What would happen if you actually took numbers off of your rubrics and you just scored it with the rubric and then didn't have a letter grade with it? What would happen? So I like that experimentation to see what would work for us in our classrooms. And again, take what works and set aside what doesn't work. She had some other things that made me have moments of pause as well. She says some of the concrete things that we can do or talk about grades less frequently. And this was a moment of reflection where I realized I was guilty of contributing to the monster of the system that I said I hated, but actually was fully immersed in. So when I was teaching honors freshmen, they were always like nail bitey at the end of the term as we headed into final exams, because they wanted to know exactly what score they needed to earn on my final exam to get the grade of their dreams. And I fed into that. I gave them the formula up on the whiteboard. I walked them through the math of how to figure that out. I would give them like a couple of minutes to like get their little calculators out and tally it up. And what I realized from Sarah's book is I didn't mean to, but I was sending the message that all of the learning in my class didn't matter. What mattered was the score that they got at the end of the term that goes on their transcript. And that sucks. Like, I don't like that. Like, I'm part of the problem. Like, I'm creating it too. So I would just talk about grades a lot less frequently. And I would do more completion points on assignments that are just practice. They're not the big assignments. They're just like, a stretching and learning and going. There's nothing wrong with throwing some completion points on a stack, put it 5 out of 5 and go. And then she had another idea, which I've used a couple of times, which has been really successful, is when you're grading a stack of papers, student writing, and you're starting to see trends of missteps that students are making over and over again, put the pause button on that. Do some mini lessons to remediate the problems that you're seeing. If 80% of the class is having the same sort of problem, clearly there's a gap in their learning. Let's hit the pause button. Let's not penalize them with points. Throw completion points on that assignment. Make it a 5 out of 5. Very inconsequential in the grade book. Do a mini lesson about how to fix that thing. And then, the next couple of days, the next week, give a different but similar writing assignment and see if that lesson stuck. And then you can score that one. So I like that creativity of using the students' work as feedback, but not always for points. And my final takeaway is that it's not just the teachers who are thinking about the cracks in the system and struggling, it's the students too. Ask your students, does the grade reflect what they actually know about the subject? Maybe it does, and your grading system is on point and it's all good. But chances are the grade in the computer grade book is very different than the actual sum total of learning that the student has done. And I have found often at the end of the 20-time experience, which is a project-based learning thing that I've used in the spring semester with my classes for about the past 5 years. I'll link down there if you want to learn more about that. But at the end of 20 time, after the speeches and everything is done, I often launch a discussion with my students about learning just for the sake of learning and building something because you're passionate about it versus doing something just to get the points. And there's a ton of pressure on these kids to perform well. Many of them have bought into the fallacy that college is the only path to success. It's just not true. And so we talk about some of that. And a lot of them are doing it to please their parents. They don't want to let down mom and dad. And so they are anchoring their self-esteem and their parents' happiness and the quality of their relationship on the number of A's on the report card. And I've talked to my classes about that, and it's some of the most liberating moments for the kids to realize that there are grown-ups in the system who see the cracks in the system too. The kids get it. They will hack the system if they have to. But if we could give them more opportunities to learn just for the sake of learning and let the points, set that aside as much as possible, I think that goes a long way towards lowering stress and increasing learning, which is always good. So thank you, Sarah. I really enjoyed your book. I would recommend that if you are intrigued with the idea and really are thinking that this might be a fit for you, you might want to pick it up. She has a ton of the forms and the spreadsheets she uses on her the publisher set up a website where she has the wording of the letters that she uses for parents to kind of explain what it is she's doing. And then there's other teachers she's connected with who are using this for 6th grade and 9th grade. And so she has examples of what their materials look like too. I just thought it was cool. Teachers writing books and sharing ideas is amazing. So if you want it, great. If not, just think about why you're doing the things you're doing and are those routines getting you the results you want? Self-reflection, self-awareness is always a wonderful, wonderful thing. So thanks, Sarah. I don't know you. There she is. I don't know this lady, but I feel like we would be friends. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. And if you made it to the end of the video, that's awesome. leave it below. Give me comments. Have you read the book? What books have really impacted your classroom? I'm heading into summertime. I have my new summertime haircut, and I definitely am interested in maybe doing more of this, just talking about ideas that other cool people are putting out into the world, and then I can maybe amplify them here on the channel. All right, that's it for me this time, you guys. Have a beautiful, beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.